Introduction. If you could increase your brain power, then theoretically you could accomplish almost anything. While having a healthy and strong body is highly important as well, most of us would probably agree that our activities are more reliant on our cognitive abilities rather than our physical ones. Many people have computer-based jobs, for instance, and this means that we need to use our brains to handle data, to manipulate software, or to come up with business strategies. Much of our success comes down to our ability to interact with others, which of course is very much dependent on our intelligence and our brain power. Whether you're giving a presentation and choosing the best words to communicate your message, or whether you're in an interview or date setting and trying to quickly find the wittiest or funniest response to a question. Problems at home tend to involve finances, social situations, or legal issues. There are very few problems we can solve with our fists. In our spare time, we tend to pursue more intellectual activities too. Perhaps we play video games, reacting to enemies and solving puzzles. Or maybe we sit and read. And even when an activity seems physical on the surface, it is in fact very often just as much cognitive. Take sports, for example, which require you to be aware of the positions of your teammates and opponents, and to use your body efficiently and accurately through space. Or how about doing physical labor, such as making repairs, which almost always involves some measure of engineering. So, if you were smarter then, or if you just had greater command over your mental faculties, you'd be able to concentrate longer on tasks and get more work done, thereby progressing further in your chosen career and earning more money, thereby giving yourself more free time at the end of each day and giving you fewer things to stress about. Come up with unique ideas and novel solutions, thereby potentially making yourself rich or changing the world in a positive way, thereby solving problems that you face in your daily life. Improve your physical and sporting ability. Impress anyone in a conversation. Become better at any given task, from plumbing to computer games. Become more self-sufficient and self-reliant. And even beyond the practical and tangible benefits of boosting your brain power, you'd be able to benefit from simply having a greater appreciation for the world around you, a better understanding of how things work, an enhanced capacity for learning, and more incentive to do so. Perhaps you could improve your understanding and appreciation of the very nature of life and the universe. Become limitless. It's quite doable to imagine what would be possible if you had greater brain power. And so perhaps the best place for us to look to is fiction. What if we consider a fictional example of someone who is suddenly bestowed with incredible mental capacity? And the best recent example of this probably comes from the film Limitless. In that film, the protagonist Eddie Mora is given a smart drug, a supplement called NZT. This tablet is an experimental drug that has the ability to help anyone to use 100% of their brains. Of course, this is a load of nonsense. We already use 100% of our brains, but will allow the writers the poetic license. When Eddie takes the NZT, he's instantly transformed. He goes from being a slob and a struggling writer to cleaning up his flat and his appearance and completing his manuscript, which of course goes on to become a bestseller. He then works out the stock market and begins day trading, becoming rich from his home. He talks several women into going to bed with him before winning back his ex with impressive displays of intelligence, such as his new ability to speak several languages. He moves into a stunning luxury apartment and attracts the attention of an investment firm. Eventually, he uses the power and influence he accrues there to run for political office. All this because he was able to take control of his brain, because he was able to see patterns that others missed, because he knew exactly what he had to do, and because he gained a sharper intuition and better cognitive skills. Now, of course, this is fiction, and in reality, no such pill exists. Neither can we say with certainty that you would see such a huge impact on your life if you were to increase your brain power alone. But it's certainly a believable idea that your life might change that much. This training. And what is very exciting is that there really are ways that you can boost your intelligence, albeit to a slightly lesser degree. There really are ways you can bring about tangible, measurable improvements in your life by focusing on ways to increase your IQ and your focus. In this training, you're going to learn precisely how to do that. You're going to see how you can increase your intelligence and focus to a profound degree, how you can become sharper, how you can learn faster, and how you can even improve your social IQ. By the time you're finished, you'll know how to train your brain in just the same way that you would normally train your body, and the results will be incredible. The power of working fast. Before we move on, I want to address just one more topic: the power of working fast. If you have greater concentration and if you can think more quickly, then you can work faster. This is something I've been training for from a young age, and it's something that I genuinely believe helped me to perform very well throughout college and into my career as an adult. In college, the ability to work fast is what allowed me to effectively complete more work than all my peers, and that way to get better grades, without really trying. I'd routinely leave my work until the last minute, and then complete an essay of acceptable quality, thereby giving myself much more free time. In exams, I'd write twice as much as most people, and when coupled with the realization of what examiners were looking for, most will mark papers very much by referring to a checklist of things you need to complete. That meant that I could get better grades than perhaps I could have otherwise. When I left college, I became a copywriter and started taking jobs for other people. I quickly realized that there was a lot of work out there, but only if you were willing to work for $2 or less per 100 words. My solution? Work incredibly quickly. By writing 20,000 words a day, I was on a very good salary right away. I was able to move out of my parents' house and get a flat with a balcony by the sea. With training, I learned to write faster and faster. I eventually bought myself enough time to start doing other things in the second half of the day. Things like creating an app that went on to become a bestseller and eventually writing a novel. I created a YouTube channel that quickly gained tens of thousands of followers, all because I was able to upload highly produced videos quickly. This is clear evidence of how being able to harness the power of your brain can lead to better results in real life. This is all stuff that I trained myself to be able to do, and with the help of this training, you'll be able to do exactly the same. Your plan for the ultimate brain upgrade. We've looked at many aspects of brain training and how to enhance your brain power. We've discussed nootropics, brain plasticity, brain training, and more. So now how do you put all that into practice? What are the takeaways here? Well, this is going to vary a fair amount from person to person. We're all different. We all have different priorities when it comes to our mental performance, and we all have different tasks and jobs we need to perform well. But on the whole, here's what you should keep in mind and what you should be using to achieve your ends, whatever those may be. Traditional brain training really focuses on improving a specific set of skills. With the possible exception of dual and back training, which is useful for building working memory capacity, computer games, learning, exercise, and chess are all far more useful than brain training games. Nootropics that affect neurotransmitters can be useful for a focused burst of concentration, calmness, creativity, but they are not a viable long-term solution. Neurotransmitters do not work in a vacuum. Proper nutrition is important, however, especially where it can be used to enhance energy on a cellular level, and where it supports the production of multiple neurotransmitters. Good examples include lutein, omega-3 fatty acid, creatine, coenzyme Q10, B-complex, choline, magnesium, and zinc. Certain nootropics and nutrients are useful for enhancing brain plasticity, leading to accelerated learning. Turmeric, magnesium threonate, lion's mane, and lutein. Also good for brain plasticity, sleep, learning new things, potentially virtual reality, exploring new places. Working memory is a truly transformative skill and ability and can be trained through visualization. Meditation is a powerful tool for enhancing plasticity, working memory, and control over your mental state. My recommendation for most people reading this is to start by being more aware of the workings of their brain and to look after their nutrition, as well as their sleep. Try to incorporate meditation into your routine, even just 7 minutes a day at the end of a workout, and be sure to keep pursuing new activities and learning new subjects. Consider adding the plasticity stack or an energy stack for supplementation, and be more aware of how your visualization is driving your mental state. Over time, your brain will grow, and you will become smarter and more powerful than ever before. The neuroscience of intelligence and how it works. Let's start out by looking at the neuroscience of intelligence and precisely how you can go about increasing it from a theoretical standpoint. So welcome to your brain. Here, you have a massive interconnected web of neurons, which we collectively refer to as your connectome. Think of this like the world's largest mind map, except that it is made from billions of connections. Each of these neurons represents an experience, an action, a memory, or a qualia. So for instance, you have your visual cortex, V1, which contains all the neurons responsible for your sight. If you were to open up the back of your skull and stimulate those neurons individually using an electrode, this has actually been tested by the way, then you would see points of light appear in your vision, corresponding to the specific neuron. Likewise, if you were to stimulate neurons in the motor cortex, then this would cause your arm or leg to move, or it might make you feel a sensation on your ear. Other neurons have different jobs. For instance, there are those that have the role of storing memories. These light up when we recall things that happened to us in the past. Others might make us feel happy or sad. Others might represent aspects of our personality or our ideas. These are grouped into clusters in the brain or brain regions, which is why brain damage can end up knocking out very specific abilities or altering our personalities. And at any given time, multiple brain areas will be active, representing the way in which your brain is being used. So you might have activity in your visual cortex, because you are processing the things around you. But you might also have activity in your hippocampus, relating to memories associated with the things you're seeing. And you might have activity in your prefrontal cortex, as you make plans as to what you're about to do. Neurotransmitters. The neurons are connected via long tails and branches called axons and dendrites. They don't actually come into physical contact with one another, but rather they come very close to touching and leave just a very slight gap called the synapse. When one neuron fires, it causes all of the surrounding neurons to become more excited. And when neurons pass a certain excitement threshold, then they fire too. So in other words, you might see a duck, and this might register as a representation of a duck in your mind's eye. That causes a certain pattern of neurons to fire. And those action potentials, the technical term for these electrical charges, will then travel down the axons to related concepts that are connected. These include the likes of memories you might have about ducks, opinions about ducks, duck facts, Donald Duck, etc. But only when enough activity surrounds your Donald Duck cluster of neurons will those actually light up, and only then will you experience a memory or thought of the character. Neurons can become excited, but they really only have two states, on or off. What's less binary, though, is the signal that they send and receive. And this is where neurotransmitters come in. Neurotransmitters are chemicals that exist in the brain that effectively add color and nuance to the communications happening across our brain. These act like hormones, in that they are able to change our mood and change the way we feel about something. The difference is that they have a much shorter lifespan and that they act on the brain specifically. Among other things, neurotransmitters make neurons surrounding them more or less likely to fire, and will thereby put the brain in an overall more excited or more inhibited state. At the same time, though, they can also increase the likelihood of new connections forming, and they can increase the apparent importance of certain activity, thereby directing your attention. An example is dopamine. Dopamine is an excitatory neurotransmitter, which means that it makes us more aroused and more awake, and it increases the chances of neurons firing. When dopamine is released in a part of the brain, which causes us to become more focused on whatever is happening right there, because it tells us that thing is important and worthy of our attention. At the same time, dopamine increases our likelihood of remembering that event, because it makes connections in the brain more likely to form. Finally, dopamine makes us more likely to remember things that happened, and more likely to stay motivated. Dopamine is often described as a reward neurotransmitter, but it would be more accurate to say that it is released in anticipation of reward. Other neurotransmitters include the likes of serotonin, the feel-good hormone, of cortisol, the stress hormone, and of oxytocin, the love hormone. All these change the way we subjectively experience the world, and their impact on the nature of the physical change that occurs within the brain. Brain plasticity. An area that has been extensively studied by psychologists and neuroscientists in recent years is a subject called brain plasticity, or neuroplasticity. This refers to the brain's innate ability to change shape in response to stimulation and activity. So previously, we believed that the brain was a set shape once we reached adulthood, and that it wouldn't change any further. What we now know, however, is that the brain continues to grow and adapt as we get older. in that it is constantly forming new connections and even birthing new neurons. In studies, it has been shown that repeatedly engaging in a specific activity will cause the corresponding brain area to change shape. For instance, if you learn to play the cello, then the areas in your motor cortex that are responsible for the sensation and dexterity in your fingertips will get larger and more complex. Likewise, if you play computer games repeatedly, then the brain areas that have responsibility for your ability to make out small details on the horizon will improve. Taxi drivers have physically heavier brains than any other professionals because they change shape in order to accommodate all the new routes and destinations that they commit to memory. There is a simple rhyme you can remember to understand the way that plasticity works, and that is, neurons that fire together, wire together. In other words, if you continuously repeat the same action over and over again, then eventually the corresponding neurons will wire, so that you have committed that sequence of movements to memory. If you eat a lemon every time you see a certain picture, then you will eventually associate the picture and the lemon, so that seeing the picture causes you to get a bitter taste in your mouth. The corresponding neurons fire at the same time so often that they now have a connection, and now activity in one neuron will increase the chances of the other firing. What's more is that repeating this connection will reinforce it over time. This occurs via a process called myelination, which basically means that the axons are being insulated to protect them against damage and to help the signal to travel more quickly and more efficiently from one neuron to the next. This is how we learn new subjects, and it's why someone who has serious memory loss can sometimes still perform tasks like playing complex piano concertos. They simply repeated the movement so many times that they became highly myelinated and protected. What to do with all this information? That's a lot of information to take in, and you might be wondering what it's all for. Well, rest assured that this information is important, and we have tackled it for a reason. That's because knowing the way your brain works is what is going to allow you to increase your IQ through training, diet, and more. Hopefully, you've already seen some opportunities for us to maybe tweak and enhance your brain performance. For instance, increasing dopamine can boost our memory and our focus. Likewise, you might have guessed that increasing the rate of brain plasticity might also be a very positive thing. And those are exactly the topics we'll be tackling in the coming sections of this training. So keep reading and get ready to enhance your brain power. Nootropics. The first strategy you can use to increase your brain power is to use nootropics. Nootropics are smart drugs, which in turn describe both supplements and medications. Generally, anything that can enhance your mental performance in any given capacity can be considered a nootropic. That means that technically something like caffeine could be considered a nootropic because it makes us more focused, because it prevents us from needing to sleep, and because it helps us to memorize things. But more often, the term is used to describe slightly more exotic and unusual substances. These include modafinil, for instance. Modafinil is a drug that was developed as a treatment for narcolepsy, and the idea was that it would be able to help people who used it to stop falling asleep without warning. Since then, modafinil has proven highly effective at helping people who don't have narcolepsy. Not only can it almost eradicate tiredness completely, and not only can it enhance focus, but it also boosts memory and potentially reaction time. Word has it that 99% of CEOs in Silicon Valley are now using modafinil to get ahead. The term can also be used to describe the likes of L-theanine. L-theanine is a xanthine like caffeine that is a stimulant but has a much gentler effect than caffeine. Think of this as caffeine without the jitters. Many people consume L-theanine and caffeine together, and the result is greater wakefulness and concentration, but without anxiety, headaches, or shaking. Another highly popular nootropic is piracetam. This increases a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine, which is an excitatory neurotransmitter that seems to play an important role in focus, memory, and attention. People who use piracetam say they experience music and colors more vividly. They are wittier and quicker in conversation, and they remember details more accurately. Of course, there are also plenty of stimulants such as Ritalin and Adderall, which are highly popular these days with students and others who are studying. At the other end of the spectrum are the likes of 5-HTP. This stands for 5-hydroxytryptophan, which is converted by the body into tryptophan and then into serotonin. This improves the mood and improves stress, which many people find makes them more productive and better at working, while at the same time making them happier and more social. Most people who use nootropics don't pick just one of these supplements either, but rather use a selection of them in conjunction in order to get the precise results they're looking for. And many will work well in conjunction. For instance, if you use piracetam, then it is often recommended that you also take a form of choline, seeing as the brain uses choline in order to formulate acetylcholine. It's confusing, and there's an awful lot to learn if you want to jump in, but there is a large and active community out there to help if you decide you want to learn more. Do nootropics work? But should you learn more? Do nootropics work like the film Limitless? If you can take some supplements like these and become smarter, more focused, more productive and all that, well then the question is, why wouldn't you? Of course, as with all these things, the reality is not quite so simple as a pitch. The problem with all the nootropics I've just described, you see, is that they tend to favor specific neurotransmitters over others. And that's unfortunately a drastic oversimplification of how this works. For instance, when you use something like modafinil, you are increasing the neurotransmitter called orexin. This is linked with our wake-sleep cycle, and thus it helps you to stay awake longer and to stay productive longer. But unfortunately, our wake-sleep cycle is also closely linked with various other cycles and biological rhythms in our body. Specifically, it is linked with our appetite, our bowel movements, and more. So, when you change your orexin, you can actually lose your appetite and end up going to the toilet. Rather, a lot. Likewise, if you use 5-HTP to increase serotonin, you also end up affecting your appetite. And seeing as serotonin is converted eventually into melatonin, the sleep hormone, you can actually end up sleepy and groggy too, which is far from an effective way to improve your social skills. It just makes you less socially anxious. And when you increase dopamine with something like caffeine or L-tyrosine, caffeine increases dopamine indirectly by reducing adenosine. This can prevent you from sleeping and lead to burnout. It can also indicate to your body that something very important is happening, which in turn can trigger a release of other excitatory neurotransmitters, such as cortisol and such as adrenaline. Your heart can end up racing, you can feel anxious, and you can struggle to get to sleep. No neurotransmitter acts in a vacuum. That is to say that you can't pick a single neurotransmitter to alter without expecting this to have profound effect across the brain and on countless other neurotransmitters, brain areas, and hormones as well. And with that in mind, it becomes very difficult to recommend these kinds of supplements and medications. What's more is that there is no neurotransmitter that is right for every single situation. You might take something to increase your dopamine, for instance, under the impression that this will then increase your focus and your memory. And this is certainly true. It will do those things. But do you always want to increase your focus and your concentration? What you may not realize is that focus and creativity are somewhat inversely correlated. This is to say that if you increase your focus, you can actually end up decreasing your creativity. Remember that web of neurons in the brain? Well, creativity comes from our ability to explore those different nodes, neurons, and to find novel connections. Creativity really is simply the ability to recombine existing information in interesting ways. You take two ideas or two concepts and you combine them, and then you have a new novel concept. But if you increase your dopamine, you increase your focus on one specific brain area. You become more intensely focused on one concept or one collection of ideas. And in doing so, you lose that ability to make novel connections and to come up with new ideas. Not only this, but you also lose the ability to relax and rest, so that when you finish work and you try to chill in the evening, you will still feel pent up and anxious. That means you can end up feeling less rejuvenated the next day, and thus find it harder to jump back into work. A healthy brain is not a brain that feels wired or highly focused. It is simply one that feels like it normally does, but better. You should have the ability to switch between different brain states and different modes at will. And nootropics such as those we've discussed patently do not help with this. Finally, you need to consider the risk of tolerance and adaptation. This is the risk that your brain can adapt to the change in chemical balance, and thereby become dependent on nootropics in order to function normally. How might this happen? Well, a good example is caffeine. When you drink caffeine, you reduce the action of a substance called adenosine. This happens because caffeine molecules are very similar in size and shape to adenosine molecules. As such, they end up getting trapped inside the same receptors, and thereby preventing adenosine from being effective. Adenosine is a byproduct that is produced when our cells create energy. This is created throughout the day as we think, as we engage in activity, etc. As an inhibitory neurotransmitter, it eventually starts to reduce activity in the brain, making us feel more and more relaxed and sleepy, until we start to lose concentration and focus. But if you keep drinking caffeine in large doses, then the brain responds by creating more adenosine receptors. It assumes that you have a chemical imbalance and responds in kind. Therefore, you now find that you feel more tired and groggier when you aren't drinking caffeine, and you need even more tea or coffee in order to feel alert and awake. This creates addiction, and it is what leads to withdrawal symptoms when you stop getting enough caffeine. In fact, it has even been suggested that what most of us assume is sleep inertia, the tiredness we feel first thing in the morning, might in fact be simple caffeine withdrawal. So why should you use nootropics? It's not a definite no, seeing as you can actually benefit from being highly focused under the right circumstances. Got work that needs finishing very quickly? Then a strong mug of coffee or perhaps a modafinil could potentially help. You just need to recognize the shortcomings and act appropriately. Don't use anything like this on a daily basis, and make sure that you only use it when absolutely necessary. And while you might protest about the potential side effects and risks, remember that plenty of people use alcohol and nicotine, knowing full well that it is harming them. At least nootropics boost brain power on paper. Caffeine and many others are even protective against dementia, and similar examples of age-related cognitive decline. Just make sure you are cautious when you start using nootropics, and don't break the law. If you buy supplements or medications from illegal sources, then there is no telling what you may be ingesting. And if you want to get a brain boost from something you eat, well then, there is a better way. Nutrition. In that last video, we discussed a very specific form of nootropic, the kind that alters neurotransmitters and makes you more focused, or perhaps better at remembering particular things. But I left out several other categories of nootropics. One that is particularly interesting is the cognitive metabolic enhancer, and the other is anything that can generally be considered to be nutrition. So, the nootropics we've looked at so far have been drugs or medications, usually things that are created in a lab. But how about something much more simple, like vitamin B6? Vitamin B6 helps the body to get more energy from protein and carbs, and this means it can enhance both physical performance and brain function. What's more is that it is also used in the creation of several neurotransmitters, so it won't favor one over another, but it will instead help to enhance the production of brain chemicals across the board. There are so many more that do things like this. Consider, for instance, the role of omega-3 fatty acid. Omega-3 fatty acid is an oil found in fish that has two different benefits for the brain. The first is that it improves cell membrane permeability. That is to say that the body is able to use omega-3 in order to create the cell walls. This in turn then leads to greater fluidity in the cells. The cells are better able to move freely, and to change shape, and to pass neurotransmitters and signals to one another. The result is that consuming omega-3 can actually help to enhance the transmission of signals across neurons, and thereby speed up your thinking. At the same time, omega-3 fatty acid also has the benefit of improving your omega-3-6 ratio. To simplify, omega-3 and 6 are both necessary for healthy function, but the vast majority of us get too much of the latter and not enough of the former. That's because omega-6 is used as a preservative in a vast range of different things we eat, whereas you mainly get omega-3 from oily fish, which is absent from many of our diets. When you have too much 6 and not enough 3, this causes brain inflammation, and inflammation has been linked with depression, brain fog, and more. How about creatine? Creatine is a substance that is typically associated with fitness and athletic activity. This supplement is used to enable the body to recycle ATP. ATP is adenosine triphosphate, or the most basic form of energy usable by the cells. We need ATP to move our muscles, but we also need it in order to think, or to do just about anything else. When we use ATP, it becomes AMP and ADP, adenosine monophosphate and adenosine diphosphate. Creatine recombines these two substances to create more ATP for further use, thereby providing the brain with additional energy. This is very beneficial, and has even been shown in studies to raise IQ. Then there are things like garlic or vinpocetine. These substances act as vasodilators, which is to say that they actually expand the width of the veins and the arteries, thereby enhancing blood flow around the body and improving the delivery of nutrients to the brain and to the muscles. This means you'll feel more awake and more focused because you'll be getting more energy to the brain. On top of that, nutrients will also make it to the brain more effectively. There are countless more examples of this. Everything from CoQ10 to resveratrol to vitamin C to magnesium to zinc, countless nutrients, minerals, and vitamins can enhance brain function in different ways. And conversely, eating too many ready-made meals and too much junk food can actually damage your brain function and cause it to start becoming slow and sluggish due to low energy, due to inflammation, and more. So, eating right is one of the simplest but also one of the most powerful things you can do to enhance your brain function. And by that, I mean avoiding processed foods that are low on nutrition and high on additives, and meanwhile grabbing toward nutrient-dense foods. Anything that you consider a superfood could potentially be very effective when it comes to enhancing your brain function and awareness. So make sure that you are eating a healthy diet if you want to make the most out of your brain. Meanwhile, try to ensure that you seek out these nutrients in particular: omega-3, choline found in eggs, amino acids, protein, vitamin B complex, vitamin C, vitamin D, lutein, magnesium, and zinc. Brain training. At this point, we've covered some pretty heavy topics. We've talked about using nutrition and drugs to change the very way that you think. But what about good old-fashioned brain training? What about the thing that your average reader will likely have thought of first when asked if there was a way to enhance brain function? Brain training is actually big business. You don't need to look far at all to find apps, games, and training that promise to be able to improve your IQ and make you smarter through brain training. Very often, these involve completing strange puzzles, playing unusual games, or performing math. But as it turns out, brain training is something of a sham. That isn't to say that it's not possible or that it can't be useful, but simply that unfortunately it is very often misrepresented and badly thought through. Because here's the thing, when you use brain training such as Nintendo Brain Age or perhaps Lumosity, it turns out that you aren't really boosting your brain power in any tangible or useful way. What you're simply doing is improving your brain's ability to do that one thing. So, if you play a game where you have to pick out a number from a line of numbers, then you are simply improving your ability to pick a number out of a line of numbers. And most of us would agree that this isn't all that helpful or useful. Brain plasticity is at work here. It's just that it isn't really helping with the thing we want it to help with. So how do you go about training your brain more generally? Accidental brain training. The rules of brain plasticity make it very easy for us to work out what impact a certain type of training will have on the brain. And we can actually use an acronym to work this out. SAID. SAID stands for Specific Adaptations to Impose Demands. This is to say that your brain becomes better at doing the things you make it do regularly. That means that the best form of brain training to become better at focusing on your work is to simply force yourself to focus on your work more. Do this often and over time. You will become better at doing it. Want to become better at math? Then practice more math. There are some tasks, though, that will help you to improve your brain in a much more non-specific way. These involve activities that have changing circumstances but require the same basic skills. And a surprise one? Computer games. Computer games are actually among the very best brain training tools out there. In a moment, we'll see that they can be useful for enhancing brain plasticity, simply because every new game requires you to learn new inputs, new rules, and new environments. But beyond this even, computer games are useful for just encouraging development in several key brain areas because of the skills that they require. Action games, for instance, have been shown to increase our ability to tell different shades of gray, and actually to improve visual acuity. The reason for this is that shooters require us to be constantly looking at the screen for signs of movement. Likewise, these games have been shown to help enhance decision-making and to increase the speed at which decisions are made, without negatively impacting on the quality of those decisions. Again, this comes from the requirement to be constantly making decisions as to which enemy should take priority, which way you should turn, which weapon to use, etc. The difference between something like a computer game or something like a brain training exercise is that a computer game is a much more varied experience, and one that is far more closely relatable to our real-world experiences. Computer games provide realistic context and settings for our actions, and they challenge us in a dynamically shifting manner. Similarly, taking on new challenges at work, reading complex text, and trying to learn new subjects, and putting yourself in social situations that take you out of your comfort zone. All these things will be more effective at increasing your brain power than doing any mundane exercises. Plasticity. So brain training is only so useful when it comes to boosting your brain power, and works best when you go about it in less than conventional manners. But what if you take the underlying physical ability of your brain that enables brain training to work at all, and then improve on that? What if you enhance brain plasticity? Ultimately, I believe that intelligence and even athletic performance boil down to two things: adaptability and opportunity. By adaptability, I am referring to the body's ability to change in response to certain stimulus. In the case of the brain, this means plasticity, the formation of new neural connections to correspond with new abilities and memories. By opportunity, I mean exposure or training. Take someone who is a fast learner and then give them an intensive training program, and you have a master musician, programmer, linguist, or mathematician. Likewise, if you take someone whose muscles respond well to training and give them the right weightlifting protocol, they will stand a chance of becoming a professional bodybuilder. If the natural adaptability is missing, or the training program is wrong though, the individual will never become world class. There's more to it, of course. I believe that true genius is more a matter of creativity than mastery, and I feel that the right motivation and initial interest in learning also needs to be present. But for the most part, plasticity has a whole lot to answer for. So perhaps in that case, the best way to upgrade our mental powers is to focus on that plasticity. By making our brains more adaptable, we then unlock the potential to learn faster and more efficiently, and thereby become smarter. We'll more quickly adapt to the mental demands of our surroundings, and thus become better at thriving under those conditions. And it's true that with great plasticity comes amazing potential. Just look at individuals like Ben Underwood, who can use a form of sonar for navigation. Ben lost his sight at the age of 3, and his brain adapted to the point where he was able to find his way around using clicks from his tongue. Imagine if you didn't have to lose your eyes to gain that kind of plasticity. Potentially, you could learn other incredible skills much faster. Perhaps you could become truly ambidextrous, develop savant-like math skills, gain useful synesthesia, or learn to climb like Jyoti Raju, the Monkey King. You can maybe redesign your brain to your liking, just as a bodybuilder redesigns their body. The ultimate way to enhance plasticity. Before I get into the program and some new smaller tricks I've learned for enhancing plasticity, I first want to discuss something pretty big: the reason our brains are so plastic during childhood. Many of us believe that our brains are most plastic when we are children, due to biological differences. It's as though our brains switch off their plasticity once we reach a certain age, and as such, we begin to find learning more difficult. You can't teach an old dog new tricks and all that. My argument, though, is that it seems more likely this correlation works the other way around. We stop learning, and thus our brains become less plastic. Studies show us that learning any new subject makes our brain more plastic. If you learn a language, or study a new programming language, for instance, you will begin to produce more BDFN, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Now think about what it's like to be a child. You're constantly flooded with new information and forced to learn everything. I'm not just talking about learning English. I'm talking about learning how to balance and walk, learning what a human is, learning that objects make sounds, learning to make use of all your senses in a cohesive manner. And the same thing happens to someone who loses their vision. They're plunged into a different kind of reality where new rules apply, reawakening some of that dormant neuroplasticity. You'll never be as plastic as you were as a child, because you'll never be forced to deal with that much new information again. Although I do believe that it would be possible to come close with some kind of virtual reality program, virtual reality has the ability to subject us to entirely new realities, which could flood our senses with just as much novel stimuli as we experienced as infants. This is why I believe that virtual reality has a very important role for the future of brain training. Lawnmower Man was right. But in the meantime, what else can you do to promote plasticity? You will find that out in the following video. Plasticity, the program. Learning. The first part of a protocol designed to enhance brain function would have to involve continual learning. It is my belief that this is one of the best ways to prevent age-related cognitive decline, to promote a good mood, and generally to enhance brain health. The problem is that many of us learn less and less as we age. After we leave that highly plastic childhood, we enter a stage where we are constantly learning through school and through social interactions. Following that, we learn to drive. We may go through higher education, and will develop ourselves through our careers. But come a certain age, our learning begins to slow down. There's less for us to learn and less for us to discover. Many of us find ourselves falling into a rut, where our jobs involve repeating the same few actions, and our social interactions are limited to the same few friends and family. This is why you need to actively keep introducing new learning opportunities, and keep reaching for things outside of your understanding. This can be done through your career, or it can be done as a hobby. Don't just focus on getting better at one hobby. Focus on expanding your repertoire of skill and knowledge. You'll not only become a polymath through force of will, but the continual learning will ensure it remains easy for you to pick up other new skills as a need arises. To encourage this, assign yourself a period of time every week to learn something new. This could be programming or learning a language, or it could be learning to dance or even challenging yourself to become ambidextrous. Better yet, enroll into an online course. Apps and sites like Udemy make it easier than ever before. Movement. The most practical and effective way I can think of to do this is through your strength training. This is one of the big advantages of using functional type training and doing things like climbing, learning martial arts, developing new lifts. Our brain responds especially well to learning when it is physical, as that is what our brain plasticity was originally for. Challenge yourself with new movement patterns and keep yourself nimble and agile both mentally and physically. The other method is through gaming. Yes, playing computer games. Every single new computer game involves learning new rules and developing new muscle memory for quickly utilizing the controls. Computer games are the best we have for experiencing entirely new stimuli on a regular basis, until VR gets to the point it needs to. So, add that to your protocol. Make sure you are working out. Make sure that this incorporates new and different moves, and make sure that you include cardio and weightlifting. Use your body, or you'll not only lose the muscle, but all that neural tissue that controls it. Use your muscle in new ways, and your CNS will get into adaptation mode. And play computer games. That's some pretty easy homework. Supplements. What are the best supplements for encouraging brain plasticity? There are a few that are of particular interest to me right now, and which make up my current plasticity stack. This is another category of nootropics that can actually be beneficial to enhancing your brain function, and that doesn't just focus on making you feel wired all the time. These are lion's mane. It has long been one of the most popular for increasing nerve growth factor, which in turn has been linked to increased plasticity. Magnesium threonate. Magnesium has been shown to increase plasticity. Magnesium threonate in particular appears to more successfully reach the brain, making it the best choice. Turmeric. Turmeric has been shown to enhance plasticity. I read that you could try adding it to your coffee, but I tried that and it was awful. Caffeine. Yep. Good old caffeine can also increase plasticity. It does this by enhancing dopamine, which is correlated with increased BDFN, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. In plain English, caffeine makes things seem more important and more interesting, which makes the brain more likely to absorb and retain new information. Lutein. Lutein was shown a while back to improve the function of mitochondria, leading to greater energy and potentially a boost in cognitive performance. Turns out it's also potentially able to increase plasticity, particularly in the womb and during our development, but also later in life. There are plenty more, and TDCS has also been shown to be effective at increasing plasticity, transcranial direct current stimulation. But as we're looking at a practical solution to enhance our plasticity, let's focus on just these few. You can afford to add this little stack to your routine, and it should result in enhanced adaptability. Discovery. Being in any novel environment, discovering something new, or even speaking to someone new can help to encourage more plasticity in the brain. Interestingly, this has also been shown to be a trigger for accessing flow states. In other words, when you're somewhere novel or encountering something new, your brain wakes up, which encourages a flood of dopamine, and thus BDFN. Traveling, talking to people with different points of view, and trying new things will help your brain to stay agile and youthful rather than becoming barnacled and set in its ways. An outward-looking brain is one that stays healthy, young, and plastic. So, follow this protocol and you will create a brain that is more plastic. From there, you can go on to learn much more complex subjects and even motor movements with relative ease. Conclusion. So there you have it. A protocol for enhancing the very plasticity of your brain. Now, if you also combine this with the right kind of brain training, which is to say, focused on things that you want to get better at, exercising, playing computer games, learning, then you can expect to see greater returns than you would have enjoyed previously. Working memory. Another type of brain training that is useful and that is backed by a lot of evidence is a brain training game, Dual and Back. The Dual and Back test is an exercise that requires you to concentrate on a sequence of numbers or letters that are also changing color. Your job is to press a button when you notice a match or a repetition. So, in the sequence 1, 2, 4, 7, 9, 10, 10, you would press the button because there were two 10s. Likewise, you would press the button during this sequence. It's a dual and back because you are looking for two things at once. 1, 2, 4, 7, 9, 10, 3, because the colors match. Here, n equals 1, so you are looking for matches that go back 1. But as the game progresses, the value of n increases. So if n equals 2, then you press the button when this happens. 1, 2, 4, 1, 7, 9, 10, 4, 3. And you ignored the two black numbers that were only spaced 1 apart. This is hard work, and it is effective because it requires you to hold information in your mind and then compare it with new information, tasking the working memory. Playing chess also requires you to test your working memory because you need to remember the positions of all the pieces on the board, and you need to think about possible positions several moves ahead. So, the working memory then is the part of the memory that you use to hold on to temporary information that you are currently working with. This allows you to manipulate that information, and it is highly important for a vast range of different tasks and different activities. But what's interesting is that working memory is actually a little more complex than we at first thought, and there may be even more useful ways to train it. A different way to look at working memory. So conventionally, we view working memory as a store where we keep information briefly, before moving it to short-term and then long-term memory. If you are asked to remember a phone number, then you place it in your short-term memory until you write it down. Psychologists used to describe the size of the working memory as being 7 plus minus 2, meaning that at the upper end, we can remember 9 pieces of information, and at the lower end, we can remember 5. So, if someone gives you a number 10 digits long, you shouldn't be able to remember it without assistance. It was also once thought that we had different modes for remembering this information. The visuospatial scratchpad, for instance, was what we used in order to picture the items in a room and remember their positions. Meanwhile, the phonological loop is what we use to remember acoustic information by, repeating it back to ourselves. More recent research, though, suggests that working memory might be a little more complex than that. That's because working memory appears to not have all that much in common with other types of memory at all. In fact, there doesn't seem to be a brain area associated with working memory, and instead, it seems that working memory works by internalizing our thoughts and visualizing them. In other words, when you are trying to hang on to 7 numbers, you're not actually remembering them at all, but instead, you're visualizing them with your mind's eye. Brain scans show that if you imagine something happening, you actually light up the same brain regions as though you were really doing that thing. So for example, if you imagine playing football, you activate the areas of the motor cortex as though you were really kicking a ball. When you repeat numbers to yourself, areas of your auditory cortex light up. This is what working memory really is. It's not memory at all, but rather attention. The ability to internalize thought and then focus on that thought. And this makes working memory an incredibly important thing to train, because it corresponds to your ability to visualize and to juggle and manipulate information. It allows you to plan ahead. It allows you to picture the positions of other players on the pitch during sports. It allows you to juggle all the relevant information when in conversation to give the best response. It even allows you to manipulate a map in your mind's eye for improving navigation. In short, working memory is one of the key skills to enhance for better performance across the board. And because it actually amounts to visualization, that makes visualization itself worth practicing. And because it also amounts to concentration, that too is something you need to practice focusing on. This is your ability to focus on your internal constructs, which in turn gives you the ability to manipulate and manage information in your mind. Meditation. Meditation is one of the best things you can do to encourage more brain plasticity, and it has been shown in studies to increase cortical thickness and gray matter. Moreover, it has also been shown to be one of the most effective tools for strengthening your working memory. The reason for this is that meditation essentially boils down to nothing more than applied concentration and focus. While many of us think that meditation has some kind of esoteric subtext, the reality is that it is actually very simple and very practical. Meditation is simply the conscious decision to empty your mind, or to focus on just one stimulus, such as a mantra or such as a visualization. In doing this, you actually quiet all your other brain areas, and they can begin to shut down. This has the benefit of slowing brain waves, meaning that there is overall less activity across the brain, and it means that you can overcome stress and trigger the rest and digest state. At the same time, though, it also means you become better at choosing what you want to focus on. Not only does this boost your mental focus and your ability to concentrate, but it also means that you gain greater working memory. Starting meditation is difficult for many people, but if you're struggling, try committing to just 3 hours a week to begin with. Mindfulness. Interestingly, sometimes you can enhance your brain function simply by focusing on the right thing or changing the way you think. And when coupled with what we have learned about plasticity and about short-term memory, you might be surprised to see how it can actually transform your brain and the way you think. Let's start with some examples of how simply reframing a situation can help you to accomplish greater cognition. The example that comes to mind is the aforementioned hypothetical limit of working memory, which is set at 5 plus minus 2. Regardless of the new interpretation of working memory, this limit still exists, likely as we struggle to hold that information in the mind's eye and focus without losing track of it. So how do you get around this? One novel solution is something called chunking. It sounds gross, but it's not like that. Basically, chunking means that you combine multiple numbers into a single number, or a single semantic chunk. So for instance, 2 and 3 actually becomes 23. This way, you are actually remembering fewer numbers. Another interesting example of changing the way you approach a subject is to overcome the cognitive bias, known as functional fixedness. Functional fixedness describes an inability that many of us have to instantly see all the applications for any resource. We may see a tool as being an item used for a specific job, rather than something that can be used in a variety of ways. So, for example, if you are given a hammer, you might think of that hammer as something to drive nails into the wall. Thus, you might not think to reach for it when trying to pry open a window. Because it is labeled as a hammer, it is harder to think of it outside of that context as a wrench. The result is that you become less resourceful. Again, the solution is to reframe the situation and change the way you ask your brain to operate. Instead of thinking of tools and resources as tools, try to ask yourself what raw materials you have available to you. So rather than a hammer, you have a hammer and a piece of wood, some metal, and a stick. Suddenly, the options increase. Taking it further. But changing the way you approach a problem or think about a situation can actually have a much more profound and fundamental impact on the way you think too. In particular, it has the ability to change the way that you perceive the world around you and the way that you control your mental state. Remember how we mentioned that when you visualize something, you light up areas in your brain as though you were actually doing that thing? So when you visualize yourself running, you actually light up areas in your brain corresponding to that movement and to the things you might see and hear on that run. Well, as it happens, this is realistic enough to effectively fool the brain. In other words, your brain thinks that you actually are running and that you actually are moving. No, this won't actually help you to lose weight, seeing as you aren't placing the same energy demands on your body. But in terms of changing your mood and even creating brain plasticity, strengthening the connections necessary to use correct running form, It really is as good as the real deal. This is why a dancer can actually practice their moves in their mind's eye, and it will be just as effective as if they were doing it in real life, to an extent. When they picture themselves moving, the same neurons fire as though they were really moving. The neurons that fire together still wire together, and as such, you reinforce the movements and can more easily reproduce the routine. Of course, you won't be able to develop your balance or grace in the same way, because you are only using a simulation of real-world physics rather than actually making those movements. But you get the point. Anything you want to rehearse, anything you want to get better at, you can do in this way. So, for instance, if you want to improve your memory retrieval and your ability to navigate a space, then you could try simply picturing yourself leaving your door and walking down the road. Visualize the turns you'd make to get to a specific destination and see if you can remember the way or if you can accurately picture the movements. Or try closing your eyes right now and then recreating the room you're in your mind's eye, including the position of items on the surfaces. Just how good is your awareness of your surroundings and your ability to commit that to memory? This kind of visualization training can be useful for improving your working memory too, because you're using your working memory to do it. Controlling mental state. What's truly fascinating is that you can use this in order to control your mental state. Many of us feel scared in situations that aren't all that stressful, because we're visualizing what would happen if the worst case scenario were to happen. You were stressed when you were in debt because you were picturing how it might end in you getting into worse financial trouble. You were picturing your partner leaving you because you were so reckless with money. You were picturing your bank account at zero. But focus on calmer and on less stressful aspects of the situation. Focus on the plan, and you can place yourself back into a calm state. Likewise, when you are trying to focus yourself on whatever you're doing, and when you're trying to fixate on the task at hand, you need to make sure that you remind yourself in your mind's eye why it's important. Struggling to complete that essay? Picture yourself relaxing and feeling calm because you're finished. And picture what happens if you don't finish on time. More importantly, focus on the things about that essay that are inherently valuable. Dear valued customer, first off, thanks so much for purchasing the guide that will teach you how to train your brain and increase your IQ, focus, and creativity. If you follow the step-by-step guide, you will be heading straight to that goal. But what if you can do it even faster? And what if you could ensure that you get the absolute best results possible and stay focused? In short, making sure that this is a real success. The good news is, you can. For a limited time, you can get access to the video upgrade to the guide you just purchased at a big discount. This powerful upgrade will make it easier to get started and stay committed to your ultimate goal. Just to be clear, this is an exclusive upgrade for customers only. Why you need to upgrade to the video version of the Smart Brain Guide. Did you know that most people learn a lot faster when they see something being done on video than by just reading about it? That's because most people out there are visual learners. How do you normally learn the best? Although the guide you just purchased gives you a step-by-step approach to train your brain and increase your IQ, focus, and creativity, but many of the brain training hacks require you to pay very close attention to the details to get the best results possible. If you miss any of the most important details or do things the wrong way, you may miss out on the fullest benefits offered inside the guide. For that very reason, I've put together a video version to make it much easier to get positive results quickly. The video version of the guide you just purchased will help you avoid missing any important key details that you might miss by only reading the guide. Stay focused and accountable, and follow through, and make sure you get ongoing results. Ensure that the work you put in now keeps on giving you benefits long into the future. Introducing the Smart Brain Video Course. Are you ready to train your brain and increase your IQ, focus, and creativity a lot faster? If the answer is yes, click the link below. Of course, you're probably wondering how much this is going to cost, right? First off, cost is the wrong word. This upgrade is an investment that will pay for itself many times over. And the good news is, right now you can upgrade and lock in a massive 75% discount. This is the next best thing to having a brain training expert right beside you, showing you how it's done. Not only will we avoid many of the most common mistakes that people make when trying to increase their IQ, focus, and creativity, you'll notice immediate positive results in your achievements. And it's about to get even better. When you upgrade today, you'll also get this exclusive Fast Action Bonus. Fast Action Bonus. high-quality MP3s of the entire video version of the training, valued at $27. Don't have time to watch videos? I'm also providing you with 10 MP3s that you can use while you're on the go. Listen to them in the car, at home, or even at the office. All day, every day. And here's what's really great about this. You don't have to decide anything today. You get a full 30 days to go through the video training and decide if this is really for you. If for any reason or no reason at all you're not 100% satisfied with everything you get inside, simply let me know and I'll refund every penny of your tiny investment. No questions asked. Here's how to get instant access to the video version today. Simply click the link below, enter your information, and you'll get instant access to the entire video training version, plus the fast action bonus MP3s. But please don't wait. To lock in the discounted pricing, you must grab this right now. In fact, if you close this page, you may never have the opportunity to upgrade to the video version of this ever again at an investment this low. And remember, this special discounted pricing is reserved for existing customers only. Are you ready to make things happen a lot faster? If you prefer to learn by being shown how to do something and you want to get results quickly, this is for you. If you're really serious about training your brain and increasing your IQ, focus, and creativity, this is for you. And if you're one of those people that's a visual learner, you need this. Here's to becoming the most productive you that you can be. Remember, if you close this page, you may never see this again at such a low investment. There's no risk. Try this out for 30 days and then decide if this is for you. It doesn't get any easier than that.